Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at the Center for Naval Analyses to talk to Sam Bendett, key member of the Russia team here, also with the American Foreign Policy Council. Sam, a lot of activity going on with our Russians. This is part of our ongoing threat report series, and Sam's been kind enough to participate in many of these. We talked to Michael Kaufman as well recently, who heads the Russian unit here. Talk to us a little bit about the Vostock Exercise.
It involves a lot of forces from the eastern and central military districts, all airborne forces, long-range forces, parts of the northern fleet. Involves a lot of tanks, a lot of armored cars, a lot of armored vehicles, involves up to 1,000 or so aircraft of all types. So certainly Russians are making it a very massive and large-scale attempt at an exercise.
And it also has Chinese participation in it, which is what's getting the, so the exercise in itself with Russians involved is significant. Talk to us about the Chinese element to this and what that indicates.
Well, in many parts, and many analysts would also agree that Chinese participation is to allay any Russian fears that the exercise is directed at the Chinese. And because of the ongoing Russian-Chinese military cooperation, political cooperation, because the states are working together in many ways, Chinese are key participants, as well as Mongolians for that matter. So Chinese are contributing about 3,200 troops, as well as aircraft and armored vehicles as well.
And there are also naval units involved as well, Chinese naval units.
That's correct. That's correct.
This exercise is interesting, comes just before NATO's big Trident Juncture exercise, which is going to be up in the north, just like the last Trident Juncture was right. looking at operations in the south. Talk to us about sort of the link and the messaging that the Russians are trying to do, and how Vladimir Putin, as always, manages to, whether he's going to show up shirtless, somewhere in Central Asia or something like that.
Well, there's a statement from the Russian government that Vladimir Putin may, in fact, visit parts of the exercise. He didn't stop by at the Army 2018 Military Expo, which we'll get to as well. He sent a message, but he may stop by as well. So this is certainly a very powerful message. Whenever a large-scale military exercise by a major country like Russia takes place, the world takes notice, and this is certainly intended to put the world on notice. It's intended to put Americans on notice as well. Russians haven't done a large-scale exercise in quite a while. They've done much smaller exercises. The Zapad exercise, which the West fears would involve 100,000 troops, in reality had less than 20,000 forces at any given time. So if Russians do manage to put a lot of forces in the field at once, over 100,000, it would speak to their increased capability. It would speak to better command control communications. It would speak to better logistics. It would speak to other parts of the military that runs a large force like that, like the intelligence forces and other supporting elements.
You and I have talked a lot about unmanned vehicles are one of your specialties, and we've talked about that. We heard about Iran and Syria and how it fell short of expectations a little bit, showing up even in the Russian press. And you gave us a little bit of a prelude on what we thought, Okhotnik and a couple of other things. Talk to us about some of the things that were actually debuted there, now that the show is over.
Well, a couple of unmanned aerial vehicles were shown there. Russians are investing a lot in unmanned helicopters, so they exhibited new models. Russians are also investing a lot in unmanned ground vehicles. In fact, one military enterprise showed a UGV, unmanned ground vehicle, that works in pair with a UAV so that its operational range could be extended via a comms link on an unmanned aerial vehicle. There were interesting upgrades and updates to existing unmanned aerial vehicles as well. One of Russia's workhorses is Eleron 3, which is a small short-range UAV. Russians unveiled an upgrade called Eleron 7. There were also major announcements about some of the upcoming unmanned systems. Russia has a self-propelled howitzer and an anti-aircraft system called Derivatsia. Russians intend to build a military robot on the Derivatsia platform. There were other platforms as well, but interestingly enough, one of the more key announcements came in the fact that Russian medium-altitude, long-endurance Orion UAV, which was just recently unveiled, is supposedly going to be sold to a Middle Eastern customer. There were other interesting announcements as well. Some of the military unmanned developments that will take place this year and next year. So Russians announced that Okhotnik combat UAV, which we actually talked about earlier, is going to be finally flight tested this September and next year. And then earlier we talked about the military test for Russian Uran 9 unmanned ground combat vehicle, which didn't necessarily do well in Syria, but Russians unveiled that model with upgraded military systems as well.
And let me ask you about the Iron Man that was at the gate, you know, with legs and arms. I know that that was a little bit of eye candy, but what was the messaging there that you were seeing?
I think the messaging is that they're not just copying and pasting things from Robocop and Star Wars. They're actually thinking about new and novel ways that a human and a machine can work together. So that was not a working prototype. I think they called it Igorek. That was a concept, and obviously something to attract the customers into their pavilions.
And I like that Igorek, like a little bit of the folk,
Exactly.
folk, and tell our audience.
Like it's your friend, right?
Exactly. But what other things did we see? Because there were also a whole series of roundtables that accompanied the show, which made it more interesting, right? It wasn't just sort of a dry conference. There was a lot of military intellectual thinking that was going on there as well. Talk to us about the conference element and some of the other things that also were being demonstrated and shown there, just aside from all of the UAV stuff, which has been a key focus.
Well, there were dozens of roundtables and workshops that took place at the Moscow Army 2018 location. And a lot of those discussions were devoted to development of military technology in the near future. One of the biggest and most important roundtables was development of information technologies. So Russians are investing heavily in IT technologies, in high tech. So how will the Russian domestic IT market support Russian military developments as well? So a lot of discussions. Some of them were open, some of them were behind closed doors, but this type of intellectual discussion is very important. It's becoming key to Russian military development and the development of new systems.
And let me bring it back around to China and Russia from a cooperative standpoint. U.S. strategy from the Cold War onwards has been to try to separate Russia and China. That worked fairly effectively in the Cold War, although there were a whole bunch of strains between the relationship between Moscow and Beijing about the interpretation of communism, and then the relationship between Mao. We took advantage of that. Yes. There are those who say that we helped build up China in part because of investment and transfer of technology and all of that. And then the two were somewhat separated, but now there's a pretty rapid closure between the two, isn't there, in terms of getting closer?
Right. And these two countries are motivated by their distrust of Washington, D.C. So as long as Washington, D.C. Will agitate either Russia or China, the two countries will be growing ever closer. Now, they have their own self-interest, they have their own motivations, but right now, this is definitely a very strong relationship of convenience that both countries can forge mutual cooperation as long as that cooperation is directed at the existing hegemon, which is the United States.
And more cooperated anti-Western effects in the United Nations as well, given that both of those nations are Security Council members.
That's right. They have a lot of influence. They've had influence since the end of the Cold War, and they may exercise that influence in the future.
And then from a Chinese perspective, you're now allied with a nation that with which you share a border that you can now get natural resources from over land without going by sea.
Certainly. Russia as a resource base is very important to China. Now, China is a global player, so it's definitely trying to diversify its quest for natural resources, but Russia is right next door, and Russia is a willing player in this as well. So again, as long as both countries are motivated by distrust of the United States, they can grow ever closer.
Sam Bendett of the Center for Naval Analyses and the American Foreign Policy Council. It's always a pleasure, Sam. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Glad to be here.